Welcome, Prepared Leader, from crisis to confidence. This is the podcast for leaders who know that resilience isn't just something you plan for, it's something you practice. I'm Helen Lipscombe, and in every episode, we explore the human side of high-stakes leadership, the real habits, hard lessons, and surprising strengths that prepare you to lead through change, not just survive it. Today, we're going to be talking about something that keeps a lot of leaders up at night, even if they never could quite put it into those words. It's what happens when the person who holds everything together isn't there. It could be sudden illness, an unexpected resignation, or simply the reality that too much lives in one person's head. For small, lean organizations, a single absence can be the difference between business as usual and a genuine crisis. My guest today has built her career helping businesses fix exactly this problem. And she focuses on building the systems, the processes, and the teams that mean that operations will keep moving when that unexpected happens. The insight she brings to this conversation is that operational resilience isn't a luxury reserved for large organizations with big continuity teams, but it's a discipline that every leader needs. Think about it. What would you do if your most critical person isn't available tomorrow? What would that mean for your business? Today's conversation and what you're going to hear today might just change how you think about that question. My guest today is Rachael, and she is director of My Freelance Admin, a Sussex-based business that provides virtual assistance and operational support to businesses of all sizes. She helps founders and leaders build the systems and teams that mean they're not the single point of failure in their own organization. Those of you that listen to or join our Resilient Business Continuity Leaders sessions will know that Rachael recently joined that event and shared lots of insights. And based on that, I wanted her to come on the podcast to go deeper to share her expertise in this area. Rachael, welcome to the Prepared Leader. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with where we always start really when we talk about resilience in these podcasts, and it's about purpose, meaning, because that to me is the first point you need to be thinking about is why are we doing this? What really anchors us in the work we do? So from your perspective, it'd be really helpful if maybe you can talk through what made you first realize that businesses are a lot more fragile than owners think, and that maybe they need to think about systemizing things and building appropriate teams.
Yeah, really good question. So I've realized now that basically every point in my career has led me to this point where what I'm doing now. I won't go too deep into it because it's quite a long story, but my main thing is that every role that I've worked in, I've always been the one that builds the how-to book, that we would call them the admin Bibles in a few of the companies actually. So I've worked, in an events office. That was kind of my natural go-to, was to get these processes in place and to have them documented. I don't know why. It was just always within me that that's how I needed it to be, is that we had things documented. I then went on to work for an architecture firm and I did a similar thing. When I left that architecture firm, I wrote a 49-page handover document, which was literally, this is the how-tos. And then I've had various other roles as well where I've done similar. And like you said, they're so important, and yes, they're really important in big organizations, and a lot of big organizations do focus on that. I mean, a lot don't, but they might they'll be small, but small businesses tend to not focus so much on it, don't they? Because they think we'll be all right, but actually they're kind of more at risk than the larger ones, because there's less people. People tend to have more responsibilities, don't they, in their roles? So they might be covering what technically could be 3 persons role in a small business, and therefore have all that knowledge. So it's so important that, yeah, like you say, when someone does leave or go off sick, that there is that continuity there.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think it's really interesting, the sort of comparison you made to those larger organizations, because they, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they do have clear governance structures. They do have clear frameworks and plans that they document. What does that when you sort of apply those principles or some of those principles to smaller organizations, what does that actually look like? What is it that organizations should be thinking about and kind of putting together as the how to? Because I really like that, because it's very simple and straightforward, but it is the really important thing you need to be thinking about, is that how do we do what we do, and therefore how will we continue to do that in the scenario of we haven't got the right people, we haven't got the right systems, we haven't got the right locations.
Yeah. So, of course, every business should have a business continuity plan, but I'll sort of approach it from like a more of an admin perspective, just because that's my world. But what we tend to do when we work with businesses is we focus on, because we work with quite small businesses, we focus on the customer journey. So whoever their customer is, what does their customer journey look like? And then we'll focus on all the kind of different steps in that process, and then offshooting from all of those steps there'll be processes, and then there'll be people who own those processes. So for example, there was a building and contractor firm we worked with, and we mapped out their customer journey. Then we mapped out exactly what happens. Now with them, they were only a small team, but there were different people in the team, so it wasn't just admin we were looking at. There was designers, there was contractors, people going out and doing the work. So that was a case of, for our focus was mainly on the admin role, but we still mapped out the whole process and who owned those bits of the processes, because we needed to, in order for everyone to understand whose responsibility was what. They were a small business that were growing rapidly, so they needed, it was one of those things where it was all in the business owner's head, and he'd been functioning for a couple of years, I think, but he was just like, what happens if I'm not here, or I want to go on holiday, what happens? So we always start with sort of mapping out the journey, then looking at the roles, and then ultimately building a how-to document for that role, and mostly we can just focus on the admin ones. We don't tend to focus on the design ones, other than where they kind of might get pulled into some kind of admin. So for example, we're working with another client who's a gardening company, and they've got multiple departments, and we've been working on a CRM setup for them. So setting up one system that has everything in place. So therefore we have gone through all the different departments and all their different roles, and what that requires. So to answer your question, for me, it's like the role itself needs some real clear documentation. And that can be whatever you need it to be. It all depends on your systems that you have in place. It might be just like a Word document on a Google Drive. That it might be as simple as that. You might have different things, like ClickUp or Trello, or you might use different, or your own CRM system where you want to store it in a different way. But there needs to be some kind of outline of what that role entails, and also just how much priority should be put on the tasks. This is a task that if this doesn't happen, everything goes to pot. Whereas this task is like a nice to have. So that's really important. I might be jumping ahead here as well, but systems are really important. So knowing, like, having a system that's coherent, so it's not all this is here, this is here, this is here. If you can have one system where you can store as much as possible, so that it's all easily accessible, that's really important too.
I think that's a point for which I think we will come to a little bit more in more detail later on, because I think before we get into the kind of almost the what good looks like, it'd be really good from some of those organizations you talked about, and just kind of your experience again, to hear for those organizations you're working with, and you're obviously mapping their processes, what do you see are the sort of most common single points of failure or challenges that they're focused on, or that you identify through that? Because that whole mapping thing, to me, again, this is where there is a huge connection between what I'm doing with organizations, what you're doing, because where business continuity often falls down is no one knows the links. What you're talking about is that connect the dots, so that then you can start to see some of these risks, and you can start to understand that. What sort of experience have you had in terms of understanding, I guess, what single points of failure you've found through that process?
Well, I'd say related to, but not solely, the answer is communication, because I always find communication is the biggest issue in any role I've had, and also talking to my friends as well, and their kind of gripes are always to do with communication within the business. So that's a definite point.
Yes.
But yeah, and I guess it is related, because I was going to say people just not understanding what they're responsible for and not actioning it. The other thing I was going to say was that whole thing of like, when it has been carried by one person, whether that's a business owner or someone who's in a team, just getting that out of their head, and think that's often really difficult. There's always so much more than they realize as well. So those are some key things.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me on to that's the next thing I was thinking about, because I think there is that element of, and I recognize this in myself, when you are the founder and the main person in an organization, you do know everything, you know what's happening, you have to know everything. Do you find that sometimes a leader's kind of, one, are they willing to share that with you in the first case, but also, like, to your point, how do you help them to understand how big a question this is? Because it's such a big question, and again, it doesn't stop, to your example earlier, it doesn't stop just with admin, because admin, yes, that's maybe where your focus is, but admin touches on the whole organization. So it is about connecting with all the dots and kind of getting them to realize that knowing everything is one thing, but letting more people in and sharing that and documenting it actually make you stronger.
Yes, like this has worked with all the businesses we've done so far, but I can imagine it wouldn't with some, like maybe more product-led businesses, but where we go through the customer journey, that really tends to unlock those questions. So I can delve deeper, so that the business owner might say, oh, a lead comes in, it gets added to a CRM, and then my question will be, okay, but how? Where does that go? What happens next? Is there a follow-up? So it's like delving into those questions. And equally, like with the company where I talked about, they had designers and things like that. It's like, oh yeah, then it's handed over to the designer. And it's like, yes, but what then happens? Like,
yes,
what does the designer then do? Or what does the admin person then do? Is it literally they never look at that job again? Probably not. They'll still be involved in some way. So yeah, it's trying to get people to understand the wider picture, and that there are all these offshoots. Even when we're just talking about admin, there's several offshoots. It touches on so many different things.
Yeah.
So that can be a real challenge, but it's not impossible. It's the fun bit.
No, that's again what I love about what I do, and again, it's very similar to what the thing is, you can go in and ask all these really open questions, because you don't, you're not going in as an expert from a business perspective. You are going, tell me, explain this process, and I value that as a kind of similar skill set, because I do think that's how you get organizations to start thinking about business continuity and resilience, is that talk me through what you do, and then let's talk about, okay, so if you haven't got something, what would you do differently? That's kind of what we get to. And again, it's not being focused on what the outcome of that process is. It is about, let's consider it now. So let's spend time in the preparation, the planning phase of what you're talking about, that documenting of that whole process. Let's spend the time on doing that, and doing that in an appropriate way, and really understanding it. So again, not making some assumptions about, oh, so I hand it off to the designers, and then I go la la, I go la 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 la. That's not the reality, because that isn't the reality. That's not how organizations work. The organizations work certainly it's not how good organizations work. There is that element of, there will be those continuous touch points, and there is that, it's sort of almost the elements of what is good project management. There has to be someone that's managing this process through, and making sure that you go through all the different stages and go through all the gates, and you get to the end point, and that the right people have been involved in that process. I think that's what I can see, the huge value of what you're talking about is just people understanding that it is complex, and it's not straightforward, and it's not linear. It's not, okay, I go from A to Z and all of these people are going to get involved, because that isn't always the case. And there'll be points when it will come back to the admin team, or it would come back to the designers, and understanding how that would work in practice is really important.
Definitely. And then it comes back to communication. It's like having that that communication between the understanding and then the communication as well is really key.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, I really like the communication. It's the biggest problem we all have because we don't do it well ever. But also the roles and responsibilities you talked about, knowing what's my job and where do I sit in this end-to-end process, and what am I, what's my authority to work, and then when do I need to hand that off to somebody, but also when are people going to come back you're also talking about documenting that as part of this, it sounds like. So that again is I think that's where particularly organizations that have grown rapidly, often that gets lost, because they haven't spent the time kind of mapping that out, or spent the effort and time thinking about, okay, I'm bringing in a new manager. What are they doing? Okay, I've got a job description I found, but actually, how does that fit into my whole organization? And is that role clear, or are the people clear on how they will use that role and how it connects to what we're going to be doing, as an example?
Yeah.
But I think it's a big part of it, because I think, again, I think what you've talked about is about documenting clear processes, so that it doesn't live in people's head, which is really straightforward, really simple. But it is an area where we were both so in our experiences, we've seen that doesn't happen, whether it's, some of it happens and then people move on, or some of it happens to a certain extent and there's this bit's really well known, but then there's a gap. How have you and your team kind of helped in those kind of situations where maybe people aren't necessarily following through on that? And actually, what kind of tools have you talked a bit about tools, but what are the things that people can do to really do that well and actually build better preparation for these kind of situations?
Yeah. One thing I was going to say is that these processes are always evolving. So it's definitely do the job, but don't just go, right, that's us done for 10 years. It's definitely an ongoing review and manage. If you have a larger team, what the best thing to do is to have someone, the manager of those people, they should be doing check-ins with the team members, reviewing it and asking, or giving the people time to review it. Just, is this still relevant to your role? Are there any things we want to take out, tweak? Also, tech changes so quickly now. So I had a call this morning about using something called Intercom, which is like a customer service thing. And we last used it a year ago for a tech client that we were working for. In that year, it has changed phenomenally. Wow. Like we're looking at using it again for a new client. And I'm like, wow, this can do so much more than it could a year or maybe even 9 months ago. It wasn't that long ago. So tech is moving so quickly. So therefore, we probably need to review these things even more than we were. So it's a case of, understanding what we're doing and then reviewing it, making sure it's up to date and monitoring it. Are you doing this? Because often things can get like pushed down the list, can't they? And then you just forget about them. When it's like, do we want to forget about that task? Should we bring that task back to the list? Maybe make it a bit more priority to make sure it does definitely happen. Maybe that task needs to be outsourced to someone else. A classic example is we had a client who she really wanted one of our team to do her newsletter, but this team member was so busy with like the normal stuff she does, it would always just get pushed to the side. So now she has a separate team member from us to do the newsletter, so it's like two separate things, so that we make sure that gets done. So I know that's a slightly different example, but it's like just knowing when to separate things from the job description or handbook or whatever.
But I think again that's the important thing about it. Again, it sounds simple and straightforward, and it is, but it is about applying that thinking about how, I guess it's, to me, it's a little bit of that kind of a bit more pragmatic and a bit more solution driven about, okay, if this isn't working, let's try and think about how we can build these processes better. Because I suppose that again is also part of this element, isn't it? One, it's about mapping processes as a starting point. Yes, you need to understand how does the organization work and what are the steps that they take, but another part of this kind of the strategies that you'd be working with organizations is how can we improve those processes, which again might be about saying, well, actually, this is a separate task And
Yes.
you kind of lumped it in here because it sort of made sense-ish, or it felt like it made sense. But now we need to think about this a bit more in terms of the further growth of your business and the further growth of your individuals. So actually there is a bit of kind of process redesign as well as part of this to actually say, let's make this a bit more efficient.
Yes, definitely. And that is what we do. We map it out, then we look at how we can improve it. So that's definitely a big part of what we do. And sometimes there is no process or, no one knows what the process is. So it's a case of like writing down, what we're trying to get to. And then we'll look at, okay, well, this is how you could or should do that. And then, like I say, then it's about assigning it, like who should be doing that task. So normally we look at it in those three kind of lenses.
And that makes a lot of sense in terms of building that ongoing process. You touched a little bit on tools. Is there any, I guess, what from your side, from a process mapping and a management of this going forward, is there any particular tools that you find are really good, particularly for smaller, leaner organizations as they're thinking about this?
Yeah, I was thinking about this before the call because I was thinking, what should I recommend? Because there's just so many different things. And I think what I would recommend is just whatever makes sense with what you already have set up. And also it depends what size of business. So it's really good to have something visual. What do you like to do? You like to see something? Do you like to see something visual? Like, is it a Miro board? Like that kind of physical thing, or is it like, how do you like to work? But then obviously if you're looking at a bigger team, you kind of need to have something that's suitable for everyone. So maybe it includes some videos on Loom, for example, or maybe it includes a checklist like on Asana or Trello or something. So but basically I think my main point is it just needs to fit in with whatever you already use and make sense with that. So like, you don't want to be sending people here to look at this to then go do something over there. If you can have one system where you can store and manage everything, that's a lot more sustainable going forward. So that might be a Trello board, it might be Monday.com, it might be Notion. There's so many different options out there.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, not asking you to necessarily recommend, but I think it's interesting to think that, because certainly going back to sort of that process mapping, I've always found things like the Miro boards are really good for that, because they are, I suppose, give there's some flexibility and adaptability from a whiteboarding, virtual whiteboarding perspective, which I've not really seen replicated elsewhere. But then to your point, there are other things that you would need. And I think there is an element of keeping it simple as best as possible. Again, particularly depends on the size of an organization. Bigger organizations can have lots of different approaches, maybe, or different systems working together. But the more complex you make it, the more it becomes an industry in itself. And that kind of then loses its value, doesn't it, in terms of the process. It's kind of, like you were just saying, it's part of what's going to make this work better for you and what's going to add value to how you do this, rather than a tool that can solve the problem. Because I think that's what often happens with tools, and I'm not going to get onto my hobby horse about tools, a different conversation for a different time, but I think people do sometimes think, oh, the tool's the answer, rather than work out, like, you still have to do the process mapping. There isn't a quick answer to do process mapping, because process mapping is taking information from people. Then you can display it in whatever way works for you. But the tool isn't going to answer the how do we do the process. It's the other way around, which I think some people get caught up on.
Yeah, the content of the process is the important bit. The tool just makes it easy to access. So whatever, like you say, keep it simple. So if it is literally a document that you reference and it has it all written down, then that's fine. Maybe, I mean, I was thinking about a client when I started working as a VA. I can't remember how long ago it was now, probably 6 years ago. And it was all on Asana, and I actually really loved that way. It would like link from an Asana task. The task was what I was doing. And it would link to a Google Doc, which had the detail of the actual process. And I loved that, because I don't know, it's kind of two different things, isn't it? A task versus a process.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
But it
that
gave
to
you the
me worked
visual
really well.
connection, I suppose, to some extent.
Yeah.
It kind of work again. It's to me when I think about this, I am quite visual, so I'm thinking about drawing things out, and that's probably why Miro for me always worked really well because I can visually see this, and then I can do the connect the dots, and I can talk about the relative importance of different things. But I can also see that if you've got something really simple that's like, oh, this is what I need to do. I click on this, it then tells me the detail. That's a really good way of again, it's a very user-friendly approach that people will find easy to work with.
And if it's easy to work with, people will do it. They've got no excuse, right? So if you're going to make it difficult for them, it's not going to work so smoothly. So.
No, I think again that's part of it, isn't it? This has to be something that you want we want this to be repeatable. We want this to be things that people are going to keep up to date. The simpler you keep it within the way your organization works, the easier that is going to be. And it is going to actually work in a more streamlined and straightforward perspective. I think it'd be really good if you were able to share, I guess, any examples of where this work has helped organizations, and from your experience of kind of, actually made them better prepared when maybe people have left at short notice or something's happened that's meant that what they thought was going to happen isn't going to happen.
Yes. Apologies if I repeat one that I've talked about on your webinar as well, but it's just a really fresh, I mean, it probably happened a couple of months ago now, but it's a relatively fresh example. So there's a tech company that we worked for, and we were very much integrated in that company. I worked for them before I even set up this business, and then this business then took over their support when I created this business, my freelance admin. So we've been so integrated with that company, and we've done customer service. We've set up all their kind of like knowledge-based articles, which they have because they're a tech platform. They get a lot of users asking questions. So we would be there sitting and answering the questions in terms of customer service, but there'd also be help articles, which we'd be developing over time. We also worked for them as on a PA service as well. Like we were so integrated in that business, and we actually are doing a lot less for them now because of AI. There's a lot of things that we did used to do that we no longer need to, but we are still very integrated with them. So even though our contract is a lot smaller now, we still do a lot for them. My point is a few months ago, the business owner went into hospital like instantly. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going into hospital tomorrow. I'm in immense pain. I need to go into hospital right now. And luckily, because we are so integrated and because all the documentation was there, we could step in instantly. So that was a lot of work, as in the lead up to that moment have been years of work. And basically, we could we could access her systems because we were still an ad hoc client. So we used LastPass for password sharing and things like that. So we could get into her systems and on a PA level, sort of move her meetings, send emails, monitor her emails. And then from the tech side, managing the customer service, there wasn't a lot we need to do now because a lot of it is dealt with, but we could jump in when needed, and there were help articles to help us. So that was an example. That was such a beautiful example how a lot of hard work had been there in that time of need. And had sustained, because even though we weren't doing such a full-on role for her anymore, the stuff we'd done was still relevant and still helped us in that time.
And I imagine a huge relief for them going in, going, I just need to it's like you taking off the list of I need to do something. Like, I should tell you I'm going to hospital, but I trust that you're going to do what you need to do. And the relationship obviously helped with that, but also all that work you said, as you talked about, you've done. It's like with all of this is like all of the build up means that is a much more seamless process. And from a customer and client perspective, she could just go, I don't have to worry about that. I look at I focus on my own health, focus on what I need to focus on. I think it's a really good example of just how this really helps in those situations.
I mean, this is probably one of the worst situations, as in, I mean, obviously she was okay and she recovered,
Sure.
but it was one of those situations where she couldn't really communicate with us. It wasn't like she could say, oh, I need you to do X, Y, Z. She was literally, you know, non-contactable. So we did, luckily her husband was there and he was sort of our go-between. And the only real bit of information I got out of her was, these are 3 key stakeholders who I want them to know I'm in hospital. So they understand why I've had to cancel and move the call. Whereas everyone else doesn't necessarily need to know. They can just be told I'm away from my desk. So that was the only bit of information we had. So we just had to act off of that.
Yeah. But again, really, really good information to at least help you to prioritize, help you to know what, because again, for a lot of people, that isn't information they needed to know, that she wasn't available. But for her, she's thinking there are some really important people that I just want to say, I'm not being flaky. I'm not. Apologies for a really short notice cancellation. That's not what any of us want to have to do. There's a really good reason for that, and that's, I want you to know that. And it's that element of trust of, I can tell you this because it will build on the relationship you've got, which is really important.
Yeah,
it's a really good example, and thank you for sharing that. I think I'd like to kind of close out with just some quick fire questions, if you don't mind. Just a couple of quick fire questions for you. So, as leaders are listening to this, what's the one thing you'd recommend they should do this week that can help to reduce their operational vulnerability?
I think just slow down and take an extra 5 minutes to think. So often my biggest kind of blocker is people like, I don't have time to stop and map out my processes and think about this. But if you could just take 5 minutes when you're doing something just to kind of map it out, or even just, I don't know, just take 5 minutes, just slow down. It will buy you so much time.
That's a really good piece of advice, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think literally just had that conversation with somebody about something else. But it's the easiest answer is, I haven't got time.
Yeah.
And it probably takes as long to say I haven't got time as it would do to do the work. In some cases, not always, but just we all run at pace. And the more we just take a moment to slow down and calm down and take some time on this, it would be good. And then the other just quick fire question, what's the best piece of advice you've given a leader about delegation?
Oh. Trying to think of I've got one. So it's, just because you can do it all doesn't mean you have to do it all. So often with leaders, you can do multiple things, and yes, you might be able to do every single thing that you need to do, but why should you? Your time is so valuable, and you should look at the valuability of these tasks. And just because you can doesn't mean you should do it.
I really like that, and I think that's a really good point to finish on. So thank you so much for a really, really good closeout message for everybody that they can think about, and when the pressure does hit, it's planning ahead for that. Thank you for coming on the podcast today, Rachael. Where can people find out a bit more about you and follow your work?
Oh, amazing. Thank you. www.myfreelanceadmin.com is our website, but please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got a really funny surname, so I don't even know if I should try and say it, but it's pronounced Bosanquet, but people might pronounce it as Bosanquet, but Rachael Bosanquet. But maybe just go to my LinkedIn, my website, and then find me from there. It's probably the easiest way.
Possibly the easiest way to work out how to spell.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that's how you pronounced it. So I've learned something today. It wouldn't have been my first thought.
No, I know. It's a very strange way of pronouncing it, but the French way is Bosanquet, but it's like ancestors back from the French line, so we say Bosanquet.
Oh, interesting. I've learned something very good today. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining me today on The Prepared Leader. If this conversation has made you think differently about how your business or team would hold up when the unexpected happens, that's the start of something important. Don't let it sit. Take that one step this week. Spend some time, pause, and reflect. If you found this valuable, follow the show, share it with a colleague who you think needs to hear it. And remember, resilience isn't something we download, it's something we practice. Until next time, stay ready and lead with confidence.